Hey everyone, welcome to the Derek to Care podcast, the podcast where we talk about the inner workings of ministry at Inspire Family Fellowship and community stories within the church. If you have any comments, stories, or questions about Inspire or our Dare to Care ministries at any point during our podcast today, feel free to send those questions to me at ty@inspirefamily.org. That's Ty spelled T-Y. We also invite you to join us in person at Inspire any Sunday or Wednesday that you're able, 523 North 21st Street, Bismarck, North Dakota. Our Sunday services are at 9:15 and 10:45, and we have Wednesday night services at 7 p.m. with a meal at 5 and classes for kids and adults at 6. My name is Ty Farnsworth. I am the worship coordinator at Inspire Family Fellowship, joined today again by our youth and children's coordinator, Kate Little.
Hi, everyone.
And our special guest today, worship leader emeritus, Bob Peske.
Yeah, great to be here.
Bubba, I'm thrilled to have you. We touched a little bit on the relationship between you and I on my podcast, but today I really just wanted to talk your faith journey and how you ended up here at Inspire and what your journey through both music and the church has looked like. So you're a Bismarck kid originally.
I am a Bismarck kid. I'm technically I was born in Dickinson, North Dakota, but at 2 months my parents moved us to Bismarck, and so I grew up here, and I grew up in the church. When my parents moved to town, they were members of Trinity Lutheran Church, and this would be in the early 60s, I guess. And Trinity Lutheran Church at that time was saying, we need to plant a mission church. And they planted this little church in North Bismarck where there were no houses named Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. And it was in a little, not quite a one-room church, but it resembled a country church. And then, they built the new one. And so my parents were very involved in Good Shepherd Lutheran. And so then my faith journey really began in 7th grade, because then I was eligible to be an acolyte, an altar acolyte. And the Catholic version would be an altar boy. But I loved it because I got to wear the robes and dress up. And before the service started, I got to carry this cool thing out to light the candles, and after the sermon I got to carry the trays out to collect the offering, and I just loved that stuff, and at that point I really thought I could be a pastor. This is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But then I got heavily involved in music at school at Hughes Junior High, and I was playing guitar in the jazz band, and that just changed everything, and got very involved in music, and finished, then I went to Bismarck High School my sophomore and junior year, and then when my senior year, they opened up Century High, and I had to go to Century High because I lived north of Divide. But was still kind of involved in the church, but not much in high school. I was more involved in the music program.
Sure.
Met my bride at Bismarck High, whose father happened to be our band director. And Pam and I went off to Morehead State University, where I got my degree in music ed, and I was also the first guitar performance degree at Morehead State.
Sure.
And so that was pretty cool. And I wanted to go to Los Angeles to become a studio musician. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be a studio musician. And so I went to a school out there called the Guitar Institute of Technology, now called the Musicians Institute of Technology, right on, and it still is to this day, Hollywood Boulevard. And Pam and I were brand new. We got married, packed the pickup in the small U-Haul trailer, and moved to California. And there we got involved in a little Lutheran church called St. Andrew's. And we joined the choir, and I was at school studying music and guitar, and the choir director allowed me to do things like write out guitar arrangements accompanying the choir. And so I got kind of involved and intrigued by the music thing and the whole church thing. And then after that year, we just felt called back to Bismarck, and we moved back to Bismarck, where I was the band director in Linton, North Dakota, and choir director and study hall teacher. And then we moved back to Bismarck. And I'll tie this all together. There's a trail here.
No, I know your story well. So
Trinity Lutheran Church, mission church called Good Shepherd, which I belong to. Well, guess what? Good Shepherd was saying, we need to start a mission church in North Bismarck. And it was Charity Lutheran Church.
Sure.
And so our little Robbie was born when we moved back, and we went to this place called Charity Lutheran, and we walked in and we sat behind Sam Coleman's parents, and Sam was just a little snot-nosed kid. In some ways, he still
is, yeah.
I hope he's listening, because I would tell that to his face. And the kids spilled Cheerios all over everything during the service, and John Coleman in his three-piece suit spent the entire service picking up Cheerios. And we said, these are our people. So we joined that, and then I just started getting involved in music there, and then that's when the supernatural stuff, and that's the only way I can describe this, is it was a supernatural experience, started happening. I was at Bismarck High by then. I had taken over for my father-in-law, who had retired after 37 years, and I was doing well. I had my master's degree. I had my band parent group in my back pocket, who had the superintendent in their back pocket, because if I wanted anything, I'd ask them, and they'd go to the superintendent. And I was moving up in kind of the political circles of music education in North Dakota, and had just agreed to be the chairman of the All-State Jazz thing. And I was also starting a foundation at Bismarck High School, the Gordon Canuck Foundation, to raise money for the music department and things. Retired band director. And I just went, how do I do this? How do I do this? And somebody said, call Kevin Kramer, who was the president of the congregation at Charity Lutheran. He wasn't a senator at that time. He was working for the University of Mary as a fundraiser. So, well, he's going to know what that is. And you two are too young to remember, but we used to have phones on the wall. And all you could do with the phone is incoming calls, and you could send calls out. You couldn't find out what the weather was or what the square root of 5,928 is. You would talk to people. And with that phone came about, in Bismarck Mandan, about a 3 or 4 inch thick phone book. And it had everybody's number in it. And I was trying to look up Kevin Kramer, and I was spelling it wrong, and I could not find the number. So finally I said, oh, there it is. And I picked up the phone to dial his number that was in the book, and there was no dial tone. Pick up the phone, it would go dee, and that way you knew you could dial. And there was no dial tone. I thought, what's wrong? And somebody said, hello. And I said, hello? Who is this? It's Kevin Kramer. I said, who's this? Bob Peske. I mean, no ring, no nothing. We just picked it up and we were talking to each other. Well, what do you want? He said, and it's always dangerous when the president of the congregation calls you and says, I want to get together for coffee and talk about church stuff. So a big question's coming.
Sure.
And I told him, well, I want to talk about fundraising stuff. So, okay, we're going to meet at, Kroll's Kitchen or whatever. And we did, and we met for lunch, and he said, well, what do you got? And I told him about my Gordon Canuck Fund thing, And I said, all right, hesitantly, what do you got? He said, I don't care what it takes. We have to get you involved in the music either part-time or full-time. And I literally laughed in his face. Do you know who I am? I'm the band director of the largest high school in the state of North Dakota. I'm about to become, I have a master's degree, and it was like, are you kidding me? And he was dead serious. And I laughed at him. So prior to that meeting, literally like 3 weeks before that meeting, my wife and I and my brother and his wife went down to South Carolina to visit my Aunt Lonnie, and I talk like that because she's from down south and her husband's a Baptist minister, and she talks like that, and she gave me this book called The Prayer of Jabez. And it was hot at the time. It was one of these, you can read it in 20-minute books. And it comes, and I can't even remember what book of the Bible it's in. And in there was all these names, son of, and then Jabez, son of so-and-so. And Jabez's prayer was, Father, expand my territory. What that meant was my influence for you, my influence for faith. And that's all it was. And in the book, we talked about that, and how you should pray this prayer. So I brought the book home and made the mistake of praying the prayer. Nonchalantly. I was a good Lutheran boy. I was doing my 15-minute devotional every morning before school and doing all that stuff, but I just prayed that prayer nonchalantly. Pick up the phone. Hi, who's this? Kevin Kramer. And we get together. So I laugh in his face. He asked me to do this. And now it's getting spooky. And I can only describe these things as supernatural. Mm-hmm. So you have to. So it's summertime. It's June, and it's in the morning time, and I'm in the living room and having my quiet time, doing my my good 15, 20 minutes, and I got my eyes closed and I'm praying, and I see this blinding light. I see a blinding light that I can't look at, and a voice says to me, "You have no idea how big I am." And I'm like, and so I realize I have to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm being called to do this. I have to do this. And now you realize I have to walk from the living room into the bathroom where my wife is, getting dressed and getting ready. And my wife, whose dad was the band director, whose mother was a secretary at Bismarck High School, who she now replaced her mother at Bismarck High School. And we rode to work together every day. And I'm going to say, honey, I got to not do this anymore. I got to go take this job, and she was so gracious and so supportive and so wonderful about it, but it was like, and that's the only way I can describe this as a supernatural experience.
Sure.
So I call Kevin Kramer and I say, okay, you win. I'm going to do this. And he made 4 phone calls and got my entire salary paid in full for 4 years. 4 families supported me.
Wow.
That's a lot of money in those days, and so I'll never forget. I started August 1st, and I was going to work going, well, what am I going to do? I have never done this. I don't know what it means to be director of worship in music. I'd be sharpening a lot of pencils and hit the ground running, and got heavy into it, and just what a wonderful, wonderful 11 years. So 11 years are going by, and there's this young punk kid who's our youth minister. Not like Kate. She is not a young punk kid. She's, but this guy was a punk.
She's a bit of an upgrade from the person you're about to name.
Huge upgrade from that. And he'll remain anonymous, but his initials are
Randy Upgren.
Yeah. He was the youth minister, and he was our children's, Rob and Tim's youth pastor. And so we loved him dearly. And so I got to work with him, and he was in seminary, and we used to sit down with Ernie and talk about things. God, what would church look like? What would church look like? What would anyway? I decided to take this job, and he was supportive. And I remember after I resigned from Bismarck High, I got in the car in July to drive up to the International Music Camp to teach my jazz band classes that I'd been teaching for 15 years. And I knew all the guys there. And a lot of these guys were all big-time, trumpet players from Chicago and Toronto and L.A. And these were guys who had played like in Maynard Ferguson's band. They were heavies, And I got to the camp after resigning my position at Bismarck High, and on the bulletin board was this big newspaper article from the Tribune saying, longtime band director Bob Peske resigns to go work for Charity Lutheran. And so all these guys thought, did you really quit? You really do? They were like shocked that I had done this. And I'll never forget walking into the faculty dorm. There weren't dorm rooms, but they were cabins. And all the guys, and I was one of the guys, were sitting around laughing and talking. And I came in, church guy, and the room fell silent. Mm-hmm. Whoa. There's your heart going, And I remember just going, what have I done? What have I done? Mm-hmm. But God just scooped me up in his arms and blessed me, and I had a great 11 years at Charity Lutheran. And during that time at Charity, I would take my worship teams to trips. We would go to Willow Creek. Used to have this wonderful arts conference in June, and there'd be 8,000 worship leaders, literally all from all over the world. And you talk about, okay, let's sing a cappella. Imagine that harmony. Mm-hmm. It was just beautiful. And so we would do these trips. Well, I took my son Rob, and I can't remember if Tim was with us or not, but we took some people on one of these trips, but we took this little kid, a ninth grader named Scotty Mann. And you know Scotty, he's a member here, but he's like married, and he's an adult now. But at that time, he was in ninth grade. We took him with us to go to this church to look at the stuff, and he was into photography and video and stuff. And this was one of those big churches in Michigan, and they had $1 million budgets and stuff, and they welcomed us with open arms, and I remember them giving Scotty this camera. And the guy says, "Oh, by the way, don't drop it. That's like a $10,000 lens." And Rob and I are like, "Oh," And so if it's just take pictures anywhere. So the worship service is about to start, and we're in this mega church somewhere south of Chicago, and Scotty Mann's got a $10,000 camera in his hand. Well, I have to go to the bathroom before the service starts, And I say this proudly because evidently Martin Luther received some of his signs from God while in the bathroom.
Great.
And so I'm in the bathroom, and I'm going to check my voicemail because I haven't been home for 2 days. And there's this voice, and this is Bob, and I didn't recognize the voice. "This is God calling." I'm like, "Oh yeah, who's this joker? I need you to come back to Bismarck High. My children need you." And I could not figure out who this was. I knew it wasn't God talking to me on the phone. And I told Pam about it, and we kind of pieced together, it had to be Tom Hesford. And he was the principal that I had worked for, and the principal that I'd given my letter of resignation to 11 years prior. And he was one of the best principals I had ever worked with. Great man, and very sad, tragic. He had a stroke.
Sure.
And so that's why his speech was so, he had trouble talking.
Sure.
But that's the message he left on my phone. And so I finish my business in the bathroom, and I go back to the service, and the service is just about to start. And everybody is jumping, and there's lights, and I mean, this is big. There's maybe 2,000 people there. This is one of those mega things, And the band is just screaming and rocking and rolling, and I'm sitting in the back of the church, and I look, what's that? Oh no, it's Scotty Mann. And he's walking across the stage during the worship set, taking pictures.
Oh,
but they said, anything,
Perfect.
anywhere you want to go. And he's up there, taking
That sounds
pictures.
like Scott.
And I'm going, oh
Have
my
you never heard this story?
gosh.
I don't think I ever knew that
Oh my
Scott
gosh,
was there.
it's just
This is
crazy.
amazing.
But I'm sitting in the back of the room, and there's that voice again that I heard 11 years ago that said, "You have no idea how big I am." I heard this voice say to me, "This is not what I had in mind." And what do you do with that? And then I'm going, well, who? And I still don't know who was talking to my voicemail. God. He says it was God. So anyway, now I got to drive home from Chicago, and I'm like sitting in the back seat, almost in a fetal position. Because I'm going, what is this, God? Was that you? What are you talking about? Was that really you on my voice? What do you mean this isn't what you had in mind? And I'm just like sick to my stomach. And because now I've moved into this Charity Lutheran worship thing, and this is where I'm going. I'm going to retire. I got this, And we get back to Bismarck, and we're dropping Scotty Mann off at his house, and he's just, a ninth grader. You know what ninth graders are like. They're just bounce, And he's bouncing up the driveway, and his mom is there to hug him and greet him and stuff. And Rob looks at me and says, wow, Scotty Mann's world just got a whole lot bigger this weekend. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm going back to Bismarck High. Because that's what I did teaching, is I expanded kids' worlds by taking them on band tour, on jazz trips, on things that they never thought they would ever see in their life. There was nothing more delightful than to take, I remember Big Mike Jensen. Was he in your era? Big drummer. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's about Josh Upgren tall and is skinny. And we took him to Les Mis in New York and sat next to my wife sobbing. this big macho kid. And you just go, yeah, his world just got a lot bigger, you know. And so that's when I knew that I had to at least explore this, because John Bauman, the band director who replaced me, had just announced his resignation to go to Mandan, so the position was open. Anyway, so I tell my wife about this, and I'm just a mess, and I get just angry at God, just really mad at him, and I look up and I shake my fist and I say, if this is from you, you'd better make it perfectly clear. And so, and I could just hear God going, all right, let's do this. I got a right one. So so I go back to that phone book. Remember, we had that conversation already. And by now, my teaching license has expired. And so I got to call the state education department and get, I got to get recertified. And you open up the book, and I think the government section at the time was some colored, and I am looking for this. I cannot find anything that says education licensing anywhere. So I just look at a number and I go, I'm going to call this office at the state, and they're going to say, oh, you want the blah, 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 and they would transfer me, or they would give me the number. So I dial a random number that I randomly picked out, and the lady on the phone answers, North Dakota Teacher Licensing, how may I help you?
Of course.
And I just look to heaven and I go, you are just showing off right now. I mean, literally. Sure. I just dialed a random number, and it was the right one.
I mean, you got to be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then my license came through, and I had to reapply. I had to get an FBI background check. I had to go through the interview and the whole thing. And in 2012, I went back to Bismarck High and had a great couple of years there. And in 2020, was it? Pam and I retired. In the meantime, Rob had replaced me at Charity, and then Randy left, and Rob left, and our family left, and we got involved in this wonderful place. And again, I'll never forget standing at the Baymont in July. We were going to do a trial run to see if anybody wanted to start this church, and Randy and I are standing there at 10 to 7 and going, what if nobody comes? But I think 150, 200 people showed up, and we haven't looked back. And so that's how I got involved here, and just absolutely been a wonderful ride for me. And so that's been my faith journey, and God's been good to me. He's been very faithful, and I really do believe he'll talk to you. And obviously but that voicemail really haunted me. And Pam and I finally figured I had to be Tom Hesford.
Sure.
But who's to say God didn't say, hey, Tom, call this guy.
Sure.
So there's my faith journey, and I guess that's how I got to be here.
Well, we talked to, people on staff, people in the congregation about their faith journeys. I don't know that anyone has had a story with their careers so intrinsically linked to the Word of God as you.
Yes.
And, we talked a little bit, like I said, in my podcast, how I got involved with the church through you. This was when you had gone back to BHS. You went back in 2012. I showed up in 2013. Yeah. And one of the first things, this was even before you had asked me to come to church.
I didn't ask you. I told you.
Well, he's still telling me every week.
Ty, you're playing bass Wednesday night.
You're showing up this week, right?
Yeah.
But you were the first teacher I'd ever seen. Now, granted, if you can recall the office at BHS, it was hidden behind the cabinet. You couldn't see it when you walked in the door, but you were the first teacher I had seen who had a cross on display in their classroom.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And I never even asked about that, but it was enough where the first time I was in your office at the band room at BHS, I went, okay, there's something here. Never could have imagined that it would lead to me being pulled into a new church family and me, having the career I do. But it was the surface level of what you just said, where God has been with you in the entire journey of your life through, you always give the example of, don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
And God basically told you, yeah, really? Don't you know who I am? Kind of thing. And you and I in our private conversations, we've talked about the difference between your first stint at BHS and your
Yes.
second stint at BHS.
Yes.
And when you talk about expanding your influence, and maybe there are people listening to this podcast where in their careers or in the things that they're going through in their life, things aren't as pleasant as they want them to be.
Right.
Or they're not as pleasant as they were before. And, I want to give myself as an example of a good thing for someone else came out of your second stint at BHS.
Yeah.
Where, it was completely different administration, completely different program, but your influence was still there.
Yeah.
And it made an impact. And God used you in coming back to that to influence other people.
Yeah.
Not just me. I mean, the Upgren boys were there and
Yeah.
you influenced them in their careers and that sort of thing. But God works in mysterious ways.
Well, my first stint at Bismarck High and with the Bismarck Public Schools, I was the man. I was
Sure.
Bob Peske. I was the man, right? And then my 11 years at Charity, God defined who I was, and that first 6 months at Charity was not pleasant, and it had nothing to do with Charity. It had to do with me and God, and me no longer being the man. You know what I'm saying? I had no idea what I was doing. So God gave me my true identity while I worked for him at Charity. And hindsight, you could see him getting me ready. Okay, you're ready now to really go back to Bismarck High, because that's the mission field. They really do need you there. And I found it wasn't just the kids who needed me. There were adults there that needed me, and they needed Bob Peske, the man of God.
Sure.
That's what they needed, and I think that's maybe what you saw
Absolutely.
when you came in my office, and I wasn't afraid to hide my faith, and I wasn't afraid. I was still involved in Charity Lutheran, and if I needed to put together a horn section for the thing, I like I said, I never asked my students to play. I told them, hey, you're playing trumpet tomorrow at my church. Oh, okay. And so that was the difference. I went back to Bismarck High, to the mission field. And it could have been Century High. It could have been any, and I'm not picking on Bismarck High. I'm just saying out in the real world is where it's at. And certainly Kate knows that. She works with kids every day, and you were helping her work with the kids. And you're young enough to remember your days at high school. And so that was a real blessing. Oddly enough, it wasn't about the music anymore.
Sure.
The blessing was the music. I got to conduct some of the greatest pieces on the planet. I just loved the music, and I loved the kids, and I loved seeing these kids get on fire for their music and doing what they did. But it was always about the people, and how can I influence them?
I want to bounce off what you literally just said. It's about the people.
Yes.
What does it mean to you now? You're in your 60s. You're still on stage every week, not leading worship as actively as you have been for the last 20 years, but you have a church home where you're still involved in, and you are seeing all of these people you've touched, and specifically your family.
Yeah.
Your son is a pastor.
Yeah.
Your other son is
Runs
basically runs the church, and then you have your grandkids involved with the youth program, your grandkids involved in the band. What does it mean to you to see that as a man of God?
Well, again, our Father he is so tender, he is so gentle. Back up again to my high school, college days. I wanted to go to L.A. I wanted to be a studio musician. And a studio musician, you show up for the thing, they hand you the music, they say, okay, we're recording in 10 minutes, and you look at it, and you read it, and you do it. That's what I wanted to be. And then I came back home, and I never did that. And human Bob always kind of kept waiting when I started at Charity, going, I gave up everything for you, God. When am I going to get blessed? You know what I mean? I kept waiting for it, and it never really happened. Hindsight is 20/20. The blessings I incurred while at Charity, and the blessings I incurred while here. And yes, I'm you're so kind. I'm going to be 67 in a month, and watching you blossom from that first time I had you play at church. When it was like, oh man, this kid is like, but I've watched you grow so much. And Naomi, I knew Naomi when she was, 3 feet tall. And all these kids you watch, my own children, watching them blossom. And there came a point where about a year ago I realized this church is in good hands, and the blessing is watching what you just described, watching all these people that maybe I had an influence on, or at least I got them in the door, you know what I'm saying? And I realized, because I told you I don't want to lead anymore. I just want to sit back in my little spot and play my guitar, and Wednesday night rehearsals and Sunday morning rehearsals. And I realized, God, you just blessed me with what I wanted all along. I'm sitting here. I'm a studio musician now. I got 18 minutes to get this lick down because they're coming. You know what I'm saying? And so God has fulfilled my dream in you. And now I sit in my little spot and I'm just in heaven. I really am. It's a good place to be because you guys are so capable. Watching you, Kate, with these kids. Who would stand in 20 below weather and have a guy throw a bucket of water at them? If you guys don't see the Facebook Wednesday things, you got to start watching Kate. And watching you with my grandchildren is just, it's like, this, you kids got this. You guys are anointed by the Spirit.
Well, thank you.
You got this. Just keep doing what you're doing. So that's the joy. That's the blessing for me.
You're giving me compliments, but I do have to say I'm really glad that you guys invited me on this podcast. I know I'm not normally your second speaker here, but I never knew the Bubba who was I am, like, where you thought so much of yourself and not what God was telling you are. I've only known the second person. And it's so cool and encouraging to see. Ty and I literally had this conversation yesterday about how we want to be that person. Like, you're not possessive over anything. You help encourage people. And like, my favorite Bubba moments is when I see you up there and you aren't even leading. You're your studio musician back there. Yeah. And you just have the biggest grin on your face.
It is a blessing.
Whether it's the kids' Christmas program, and are they playing all the notes right, doing all the things right? Absolutely
it's not about the music. But
you are just so happy to see these kids flourishing. Yeah. To look when you have Sage, Ty, Naomi, sorry. Yeah. All of these people on stage with you, all these great musicians on stage with you, and you've said it multiple times, you look down the line and see, like, you've had a huge part in their lives, and because of God, you've had a huge part in their lives, and I don't want that to be
well, and it's not just here. I mean, there are other churches.
Gets the credit.
There are other churches in town here that their worship leaders were influenced by you, whether it be at school or at church. Or I wanted to ask on top of that, because I met you as Mr. Peske.
Yeah.
And to me, you were never the I am kind of guy that you're describing. But I remember specifically a day that we were at church and I called you Mr. Peske and you go, you don't call me that anymore. I'm Bubba.
Oh, here. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
And
call
so
me Bubba.
Kate, coming from the background where she didn't have you as a teacher, she's always known you as the worship leader. What we have at Inspire with Ignite started with you way back in the day. And Kate, your memories of Bubba with WOW, where did that start for you? How did you guys, you and Randy and whoever else was involved, how did that develop into what we have here?
I was the worship guy at Charity, and I would, every June, I would take people to Willow Creek to see this massive conference, and one year I took Pammy and I took Rob and Nicole and Tim and Beth and Ernie, and I think we took Nate Hockett to Willow Creek to the worship conference. And the first opening session, the big headliner speaker was Darlene Check, and she's involved in Hillsong. She was one of the original founding members of that. Wrote the big song, "Shout to the Lord." Mm-hmm. She was the speaker, And so we go to this thing, and it's in the auditorium. It's me and Pam and Rob and Nicole and Tim and Beth and Nate and Ernie. And so Ernie and I are, we're seats apart. And the first thing Darlene Check says is, all of those of you who work for the church, as soon as you get a job with the church, the first thing you should be doing is looking for your replacement. And Ernie and I lean forward and look down the row. Got all these young kids, and she was right. So we're in the van driving home from this thing, and all our kids went to the conference for 3 days, and they saw it, and they saw the worship things, and they saw all you could do and the technology, blah, 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 blah. And it's the middle of the night, and we're driving somewhere in Minnesota, and I'm driving, and the kids are back there, and they're just yapping. Yeah, you can just, there's yapping. And my cell phone rings in my pocket. It's Rob, who's in the back of the van. And he says, Dad, we're taking over a WOW. And he hangs up. Well, at that time, WOW was worship on Wednesday at Charity. I'm like, oh, wow. So I call Randy. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. The kids are taking over WOW. And he says, awesome. This is going to be great. And so that's how it happened. They took over WOW, and it exploded. And we've just taken that philosophy, and we still cling to it. You provide a meal, you provide education, a safe place for families, and then you do this cool worship service. And at that time and at this time, we were criticized for, it's all lights and smokes. Mm-hmm. And we literally have lights and smoke here, mm-hmm. right? And Rob said it once best, that I will never apologize for using good bait. Mm-hmm. What junior high kid, what middle school, high school kid wouldn't dig what we're doing on a Wednesday night? Okay, and how many of our kids, and you guys can attest to that, came and they thought this was really cool, but then we give them the gospel, we feed them the meat of the book, and you just watch. We've seen what's happened, so it's good bait. Good bait?
We said it last week. What's Tim's phrase? If they're in the building, it doesn't matter how involved they are, they're not distracted by the earthly things outside the doors.
Right. So, and that's a tribute to you guys and the things that you do. My goodness sakes. It's just, that's why I say I can sit back and be a studio musician, because the church is in good hands. It
sure.
really is.
Well, Bubba, I just wanted to thank you for joining us and sharing your story. You know, the people here know you.
Yeah.
And you are so beloved by this congregation and the people in it. And, we get new members all the time who go, I got to see my band director in the worship band. It's cool to see the ways that you've influenced people both in the church and outside of it. And as one of those people, I can only just thank you for everything that you've done.
Yeah, and I'll just shout out to those students of mine in the congregation. You can call me Bubba,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not Mr. Peske anymore.
Karina McAllister, I can't do that. I can't call you. No, it's Bubba. No, I can't do it. The Upgren boys. Oh no, it's Mr. Peske. Can't do it.
Sure.
Fun fact. When I was the teacher of bands at Wachter at junior high, it was junior high at the time, I also started directing the pit orchestras at the high school.
Sure.
And I needed a trumpet player. And I asked Gordy Kanak, I need a trumpet player. He said, well, you got to get this young basketball player named Randy Upgren. So I would go in the gymnasium, and I asked him if he wanted to play, and he would come into rehearsals after school in his basketball, workout clothes. And he'd rehearse for half an hour. He'd go play basketball for half an hour, come back and rehearse for half an hour. So technically, Randy was a student of mine. Yeah, I have dirt on him. So
good. That's wisdom comes with a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to thank you and pray for you.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening, if you have the capability of bowing your heads in prayer, please join us. But Lord, thank you so much for Bubba and everything that he has done for this place and other churches in the area, and the people that he's influenced through the church and through his teaching, and just expanding your kingdom to all of these people. Bless him, bless his wife, bless his kids, bless his grandkids, and continue to bless all the things that he does, especially with Old Man Coffee on Thursday mornings and the wonderful things that he is sharing with men who need to know your word just as much as the youth at Inspire do. Thank you for just a fantastic model citizen of your kingdom. Continue to bless him and continue to work through him in all of his days and all of your days yet to come. It's in your mighty name that we pray.
Amen. Thank you.
Bubba, do you still have a work email here at the church? Or what's the best way to contact you?
That's a funny email address. peskebob@gmail.com.
Peskebob@gmail.com.
I would like to meet the Bob Peske because it said Bob Peske's taken. When you're setting up your email address, so it ended up being peskebob@gmail.com.
But any questions or comments you want to give to Bubba, you can find him there. Questions about Dare to Care or Inspire in general, you can reach out. Also, worship here to me, ty@inspirefamily.org. We'd love to see you in person if you've never come to a Sunday or Wednesday service. Our Sunday services are at 9:15 and 10:45. And then we have that Wednesday programming that we talked about where there's the meal at 5, the classroom time at 6, and the worship service at 7, focused on our families. Our address is 523 North 21st Street. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
Come say hi to Bubba, to Kate, to me, to anyone in the church. We'd love to meet you. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you guys. See you next Thursday.